When I was working for digital, one of the plants I worked at was in Marlboro, and one summer we had an intern from MIT, Steve, who was working with us. And I remember a particular day he came into my cubicle, and we were talking about a project he and I were working on together. And somehow in the midst of our conversation, and I honestly don't remember at this point how, we began talking about Catholics. And Steve started going on about basically how bad Catholics were. And I was like, really? Now I have to admit, I was a little mean at this point. I didn't let him know that I was a practicing Catholic and my faith was really important to me. I just kind of reeled him in. And of course, if you know anything about working in cubicles, you can hear conversations. And pretty much everyone in my group knew that I was a practicing Catholic and my faith was important. And then all of a sudden you just started seeing these heads start popping up, waiting to see what I was going to do, what it was I was going to say. And finally we got to a point in the conversation where I just looked at him and said, Steve, you do know that I'm Catholic. He's like, what? He said, yeah, I go to Mass every Sunday. I'm fairly conservative in my faith and how I look at things. And he was like, oh. And he quickly made an excuse to get out of there. I'd say probably about 15 minutes later, he sent me an email apologizing for the conversation. And I wrote back and I said, do not worry about it. I was not offended. But I'd just like to talk to you about sort of why you think what you do about Catholics. So he and I got together for lunch and we sat and we just started talking about it. And he'd grown up somewhere in Washington State. I forget where he had said. And he shared with me that he had lived in a neighborhood where he was surrounded by Catholics. And they basically made you feel like if you weren't Catholic, that you were basically going to hell and that you were a horrible human being and that your life was going to be terrible. And as he and I talked, and I laid out sort of how I saw things, his attitude towards Catholicism started to change. He's like, I've never met a Catholic like you. All the Catholics I met were really mean to me because I wasn't Catholic. And I think what can happen too often, not just to Catholics obviously, but that's what we're kind of looking at right now, is we can turn our faith really into a weapon. It's basically us and them, and we, the us, are better than them. And that's never what Jesus intended. Yes, there is division, and that division really comes down to Jesus is Jesus. He is God, and that is objective truth. And so that does separate us from people because we believe what it is that we believe. But that separation is not intended to make us think we're better than someone else. It's not intended to put us above others. And it's certainly not intended to be able to create a weapon against others as to who they are as opposed to who we are. The reality is we're all broken. We're all sinners. And every single human being is in the exact same place, in need of God's saving mercy that comes through the death and resurrection of Christ. And the reality is, even to those who don't believe in Jesus, or maybe those who do aren't living their lives the way that maybe they should, We can never judge a person's heart. We don't know where their relationship with God is. We might be able to guess, but there's a good chance we could be wrong. The only one who can really judge a person's heart is God. We're called to judge the actions and say that an action is right or wrong, because that comes from our objective reality and truth that's found in Christ. But that can never be a judgment of the person. Our faith is never called to be used as a weapon. It's called to be an invitation. An invitation to leading others to Christ. To letting them know the joy we find in God's love and mercy and His patience with us. And our God is compassionate. And that there is great joy in that. That's not the message he heard until he came to talk to me. Let us share our faith. But let's not share it as a weapon, as a way of tearing people down. Rather, let us share our faith in a way that really is an invitation. An invitation to know Jesus. An invitation to know our loving God. God bless.